everybody to the Supervisors Sync Community. We have a very special guest with us this week. His name is Kurt Goebel, and I'm really excited for him to share a tool that he uses, a framework that helps him think about sync and songwriting in a really interesting way. So Kurt, welcome to the group training.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I guess, Kurt, for today, there'll be, as members are in different time zones, people can join now or they can watch on the replay later, so you may hear some pinging in and out here. So for today's session, we're going to have a conversation with Kurt and really kind of get to know how he works and some of his processes. And then he's got a special kind of training framework that we're going to go through. It's called the Archetypes in Songwriting. And then we'll have some Q&A after. So does that sound good, Kurt?
Yeah, great, fun.
All right. So I guess too, Kurt, just so you know, the mission of the Supervisor Sync community is we've been doing sync licensing for 10 or 12 years at the Sync Center. We wanted to create a group of next generation up and coming supervisors and licensing professionals. So we started this group about 8 months ago, and it's been really great. Kind of the mission is to strengthen and train supervisors to manage sync licensing for their own wherever they may be. It's been a lot of fun. So, and Kurt, this is something we originally talked about. We had this event kind of pre-pandemic called Syncs and Drinks, and you came out and talked to the group, and that was the first time I had heard of this. I mean, I'd heard of archetypes, obviously, but the way you apply them to songwriting and for sync licensing, that was something new and different. So kind of how'd you kind of put this together? What was your, how'd it come together for you?
Well, part of my experience, as you probably know, but the others don't, is I've done a lot of work in commercials and have done some branding work. So the idea of archetypes is, paramount in terms of branding and brands themselves falling under certain archetypes, and we'll look at that in a little bit. So, I think it's something that songwriters subconsciously probably do on some level, the good ones, that they're operating in a certain archetype, silo, if you want to call it that. But once you really become intentional with it and you really start to look at, from a sync perspective, how the shows are marketed and how, trailers work and all of that, then if you can align your writing with their storytelling, and archetypes are all about the different types of characters in stories, then you have a much better chance. It takes the one thing that I don't do, and the whole idea of like, hey, let's get together and write. Okay, well, what do you want to write? Oh, I don't know. Let's have a game plan. And for sync, we can be very intentional. So, it even extrapolates out into certain artists, their artistic, presence and their sound and who they are is
right.
And they're even an archetype,
the good ones.
If they were to think of like, what's their personality driving their artistic vision, and their songs are in line with that. So then it becomes about, okay, well, I'm going to write with artist X tomorrow, and I know that their voice sounds like this and their messaging is typically like this. This person fits over here, so, and I'll show you, but like this artist is very much has a really warm and a warm tone to her voice, so she could fall under the caregiver archetype. So let's do something along those lines. So
what's interesting here, Kurt, is like this is you're taking like a filmmaker's approach to music. Like archetypes, like when you think about archetypes, you think about Star Wars, you think about The Godfather, you think about these iconic characters that
Right.
are very universal, like they're kind of undeniable. Like everybody attaches to Luke Skywalker or Rocky or Don Cort, whoever, you know.
Right.
So that's, it's kind of like you're using something that is a little bit impervious to trends, impervious to subjective, do I like it or not? It's like when you're talking about, I'm looking at some of your slides that we'll get into in a minute. When you're talking about the lover or the hero, you're kind of creating something, I don't want to say timeless, but your odds are better.
Right.
Because you're creating something that is attached to something that doesn't change. Is that fair to say?
Well, it is, because, you know, 200 years from now, if you tell somebody, oh, well, that character is the hero in the movie, they're going to know, well, I know what a hero is. It doesn't matter how it's dressed up, right?
Right.
So, in you know, Thor is a hero and he's got his cape and his hammer, you know, but in 50 years, the next hero is going to be in a different outfit and it'll be dressed up differently, but we'll still know he's the hero. So we can dress up the hero in different production, and this year it might be strings, and next year it might be synths, and the next year it might be guitars, but the messaging, the DNA of the song is a hero, and everyone knows what a hero is.
Right. Or a caregiver or a ruler or a, I mean, I'm looking at some of the other things that we'll talk about. That's interesting.
So yeah, you're kind of, it is impervious to, you know, everyone's going to always know what that is. The styles will change, the trends will change.
That's interesting. Can you talk about kind of like what your day-to-day looks like? I mean, you're a producer, you're a songwriter, you do a lot of syncs for film and TV. What is, give us an idea of what your week does.
Well, lately I've been writing more than normal. So I'm a little behind, but I, you know, like what a week looks like right now would be if I have a write on a Tuesday and have a write on a Thursday, because I like to work in a structure, and I don't, I mean, look, creativity, you know, there's always a bit of chance and risk involved. You know, you may have a day where you're creative and you may have a day where you're not creative, but I've been doing this long enough that it's like, you know, it's like playing a sport. You just develop that muscle. So it's not creativity on demand, but having like this framework. So if I know I'm writing on Tuesday with artist X and I kind of know what they're about and I know how they're going to function in the marketplace, because at the end of the day, sync music is functioning in a marketing capacity.
Right.
So I prep the day before. Not the whole day, but I'll spend a few hours, sometimes a couple hours, sometimes depending on if it's more guitar centric or whatever, it might take a little longer. But so I prep for Tuesdays, right? So on Monday, I'm getting something together. So when the artist shows up and I hit play, there's something there that they can immediately, they start hearing melodies like right away, you know, and some artists want to get right on the mic, first time, headphones on, and you know how it goes. I mean, they just start ad-libbing nonsense syllables and melodies, and those syllables and those vowel sounds a lot of times end up forming the lyric, like, oh, well, this is a long A here, so this is going to be the word way, and like, okay, we're off to the races. Yeah. Versus, hey, pick up your guitar and let's strum some chords. What are you feeling today? Like, I don't do that.
So you tend to, you don't tend to improvise and find your way and flutter around and try things. Like you like to have a target. Yeah.
And for every artist that I write with, I already have a Spotify playlist where I've curated all kinds of references that fit under their, let's call it an archetype.
Yeah.
So the day before, I'm going through those references saying, oh, I really like this beat. I want to do something up tempo. This is a great reference musically or just vocally or whatever. And so I'm already kind of pre-cooking, you know, the idea And, you know, for better or for worse, it's really worked out
Yeah.
for me. You know, I've had
So it's
good
almost like
success.
pre-production, writing pre-production. You stack your deck in preparation
Yeah.
using these archetypes, and to where you're not just, hey, what do you feel today? Well, I feel like a ballad. Well, we're not going to write a ballad because there's too many ballads in the world. You know, you have your target
Right.
set.
And so what that allows to happen is on Tuesday when they show up at 10 o'clock, the song is written usually by like 2:30, like maybe, you know, maybe 3-4 hours of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're in the booth. And by 6 o'clock, I've got all the vocals cut, and the production's already really far along. And so then, you know, there's not a lot of work. There's mixing and pocketing and tuning, and, you know, maybe there's some more production.
Sure.
But sometimes there's not really that much more that needs to be there. So then I might do a little bit of that on Wednesday, but then Wednesday I got to prep for Thursdays, right? You know, so there's again the track building kind of aspect of it. Because if I don't do that, you're going to show up at 10 o'clock and we're going to spend 3 hours with me, you know, like
Chasing squirrels.
I mean, hitting drum sounds, and like while you're just twiddling your thumbs in the back. And I just don't want that.
Right.
I don't think that's the best use of everyone's time.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it. Now I know some guys do it that way and they kill it too, and it's great. And there can be a spontaneity that happens.
Well, there will be. I mean, it's creative by nature, so it's just inherent to the process. But I like the way you think. I mean, you stack your deck by having a target, preparing, and really using these archetypes to hit themes that
Aren't going away.
are undeniable. Yeah, they're undeniable. They're timeless. Yeah, that's great.
And these
Kurt,
shows, movies, you know, they always need the shows and the movies always need. We need somebody who's fighting against injustice. You know, we need a fighter. We need a good song for that person. Like, that's not going away.
Yeah.
So you're stacking your odds, like you said.
Yeah. And Kurt, what have you been working on in the last few months? What's been on your plate?
Just tons of artist rights.
Mm-hmm.
You know, over COVID, I was lucky enough to get a lot of work for hire stuff. So I was writing just instrumental music for a big project. And so that was, you know, I still do that when it comes in. Mm-hmm. And helping Ellen with some of her projects, production on some of her stuff. And so, yeah, that's, you know, some commercials here and there. Mm-hmm. That's about it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, do you want to kind of share the archetypes for songwriting, and, you know, we can kind of dive in? Yeah.
And really, I mean, these archetypes, you know, screenwriters and filmmakers, they're all using this too. It's
well, they've been using it for 100 years, and it's like, what's new and interesting about this is, like, this usually doesn't make it into the songwriting world. I mean, it does, but you don't have it like as organized as you do.
So I just thought we would start with, you know, what is an archetype? What's the definition? So an archetype is a pattern that connects the people of the world across time and culture. The idea of the archetype was conceived by Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung. In writing, archetypes are characters or symbols that are recognizable irrespective of their place or time of origin. The cool thing about archetypes is, you know,
that's a huge thought.
The people in Japan know what a hero is, and it's cross-cultural, and it's not bound by time or style, right? So, and these all occur subconsciously, that we all sort of just understand this. So, the idea that it's cross-cultural is really fascinating, I think. So it's like, this is just a human experience, right? Period. It's not regional. It's not, So, which is why it's so is powerful and has such deep roots, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, we talked about, obviously you can use archetypes in the songwriting process, in filmmakers, screenwriters. But I just think it's interesting that, you know, brands fall under these archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we look, can you see over here the Explorer?
Yeah.
Okay. So the North Face, which is like a clothing company, right?
Can you take a run around the bases and just hit on the archetypes real quick?
Okay, yeah. Well, so they're listed here on the left. So the 12 major archetypes, according to Carl Jung, are the innocent, sage, explorer, the outlaw, the magician, the hero, the lover, the jester, the everyman, which I think is funny is Target falls under the everyman brand, or the everyman archetype. The caregiver, the ruler, and the creator. So in my world, in the songwriting world, the ones that get used a lot are the hero and the outlaw. Now you can think of the outlaw, sometimes it's also referred to as the rebel.
Mm-hmm.
So the hero, the outlaw, the explorer is a big one for commercials.
Right.
Were you going to say something?
Interesting. So everything is distilled down to these 12 archetype characters. Yeah. Interesting. I've heard of king, warrior, magician, lover, but I've never seen all 12 of these.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the king would be obviously the ruler.
Mm-hmm.
There's some interchangeable names, how they name them.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, now if we look around the wheel here, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a no-brainer. Like, of course, Dove, who's body care soap, would be the innocent, which is also the caregiver. And Apple being the creator. I mean, you're like, yeah, they're super creative. And Google being the sage, Google's got all of the information, on the internet cataloged, and
for better or for worse.
Yeah, right. To varying degrees of, but like the North Face, the Explorer, I like to write. So it's funny because certain styles of music fall under, they lend themselves to be used under certain archetypes. So
yeah,
I like writing like just fun pop stuff that's kind of happy clappy and it's got a smile to it. And the Explorer archetype, if you think of like even the, Jeep, the brand Jeep, and what they sell, they're selling a lifestyle, and so is the North Face, of exploration and of getting out there and seizing the day, go hiking, go on a road trip, get out in the mountains, get outdoors. That's an explorer mindset, an archetype. So you can see it in the way commercials are shot and how what are they portraying? What are they really selling, right?
Yeah.
So
they're not selling widgets. They're selling
experience.
The expansive outdoor explorer.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so, if you move in, you're seeing that it says freedom under explorer, and farther in, even exploring spirituality. But anyway,
that's interesting. So then you have Harley Davidson for the outlaw.
Yeah.
So Disney that's the rugged outdoor mono, the guy on a motorcycle kind of.
Yeah, the rebel, right? He's got his leather vest on, and he's not taking any crap from anybody, and he's got his Harley, and he's out doing life his way, right?
Right. The rugged individual type, yeah.
Yeah.
This is interesting, Kurt.
Disney is the magician. Interesting that Nike likes to portray themselves as the hero. So
what does that say in that second ring there, under or above hero?
It says mastery.
Mastery, yeah. Okay.
And then the next section in says leave legacy. Every archetype has like a motivation. Like they're singular. What are they motivated by? Right. So the ruler, or what's sometimes called, the king, like you said, they're just obsessed with power. That's their motivation. So M&Ms the jester, which is just playful and.
Mm-hmm. Now you're saying all of M&Ms, all M&Ms, like they're. I mean, this isn't just M&Ms per se. This is like M&M Mars, like the whole brand, or is this just the candy?
Well, the brand itself, it doesn't matter if they're selling M&Ms or like bars or whatever, but just
Yeah. Interesting.
because it says under jester is enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's again, it's just a singular focus. It's M&Ms, right? It's not rocket science. It's who doesn't like M&Ms?
Snacks.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So anyway, I just think it's neat to see how this works in the brand space.
Mm-hmm.
But you could distill this down into, like not so much now, but I think in the early days of maybe when the labels were in their heyday, like you knew what the artists were on RCA, versus a different
SST.
label. Yeah.
Right.
Like they all had their thing. Like it's not like that anymore, but if we think back, back then it meant something when you were on a label because they stood for this kind of thing. Yeah.
And what's interesting here, Kurt, and you've got some examples, is like you take this and you distill it into your music and your writing.
Right.
Which I'd like to hear about kind of how you, like when you say explorer, very, how do you put flesh to that at the song level?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's squishy to me.
Well, you do it with the lyric.
Mm-hmm.
You do it with the modality. So like how bright or how dark is your melody?
Mm-hmm.
How bright or how dark are the chord changes or the chord progressions? That stuff matters. Like
right.
Going from C to E minor evokes going to that minor chord is not the same as going from C to G major, C major to G major. That has a different, more open feel. You land on the G, it feels like, you've
different
ended,
resolve.
Yeah, exactly. You've ended the sentence. So, that stuff matters as a songwriter and as a composer. That's where it's like, then you're just getting in deeper on the music theory end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a powerful tool. So when you're working on a song or a pitch for a film and television use, you kind of have, you land on one of these before you even start. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Like you say, okay, this is going to be Everyman.
Yeah.
It's got to feel like John Mellencamp, that kind of Americana.
Yeah. And I think what I find, what I find really helpful is even if I don't have a brief, and let's, to be honest, most of the time I'm not writing to brief. You almost don't have to. This is the nice thing about this, because this is so universal and so embedded in every show that as long as you're working in some of these more, I don't want to use the word popular, but the ones that are used more often or that are more present, you're going to do well. Like, I'm not in this to just, I mean, I love what I do, but it's this is a job and I want to be successful at it. So,
totally. And Kurt, what would you say the top 5 are? You said popular. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, that's like, these are the uses that find a home and turn into money. Which ones are your kind of?
So for sure the rebel or the outlaw and the hero.
Yeah.
Those are really big. Those two, and then the innocent or the caregiver. Those are probably my top 3. I would imagine, in terms of like network and just dramas and things.
Yeah.
So I think what I was going to say earlier was like when I'm not writing to a brief, a lot of times we'll just think about a certain show. Like, okay, let's think of, it's not on the air anymore, I don't think, but like Batwoman. Okay, we're going to write a badass song for Batwoman. Where does she fall? Well, she's kind of a hero, but she's kind of an outlaw. Like there's a dark side to her. So that's going to inform the lyric, and that's going to inform the production choices and the show. What does the show look like? It's really darkly lit. What does her outfit look like? And so all that stuff goes into making choices that just help make it be a home run for the music soup. When they get it, they're like, yeah, right. I mean, they get, do your homework. Like, what are go to tunefind.com if everybody doesn't already know about it. And you can search all the music that's been, used on the shows, and you'll see patterns and like, okay, well, the music supervisor, there's a sound to this show. Yeah. So the sound, the aesthetic, that's your production box. Right. The archetype is your harmony and production and lyric box. Mm-hmm. Go do it,
Yeah, I love it. I'm a big believer in there are no accidents, especially in film. Like everything is purposed, intentional. There's a decision behind it. They don't just throw it up there to see what sticks. It's like
right.
It's meant to be there.
Yeah.
That's right. Interesting. So you combine some of these.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's overlap, it's not like it's just the outlaw, because the outlaw could be the hero, or they could do something heroic, but their core archetype is the outlaw. So yeah, there can be overlap.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, so here's the 12, right? And look at these, look at the people, and Tom Hanks is the innocent. That's funny. Isn't that from, it looks like it might be from Big, the movie Big. Mm-hmm. Superman's the hero.
Magician, Harry Potter.
Right.
The Sage, yeah.
Explorer. Madonna's the creator.
That's interesting.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thought that was just a neat little thing to see with how it applies to the characters in film, and then we can take. So this is just 4 little snippets of the jester, the sage, the magician, and the ruler. Mm-hmm. But where I was talking about, their motto. So if we go all the way to the right column, that's the ruler. So the ruler's motto is power isn't everything, it's the only thing. Okay, so their core desire is control. Their goal is to create a prosperous, successful family or community. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing, every archetype has a fear. So the ruler's greatest fear is chaos or being overthrown, which is losing their power. So in the songwriting side of things, I almost look at it like, okay, we know the ruler's desire, but what's the dark side, or what's the ruler's like shadow? Everybody has a shadow. So it's like that stuff can convey, it can kind of like help direct your lyric.
Yeah.
Like maybe the struggle for the ruler is his fears, and that's the verse, right? But then the chorus is, hey, I'm in control. Nobody takes me down. Like, that kind of thing. Like this is again just another framework that dives in deeper to kind of like, what's this character's? Because when we do it well, when I'm writing, if I'm writing a song for the Batwoman show, I'm trying to get inside of Batwoman's head, right? And we talk about it while we're writing the lyric. What does she do? What are her characteristics? Like, what is she driven by? So. Mm-hmm. Just wanted to show you an example that there isn't.
So in software development, there's a similar idea of the persona, and these are kind of like the end users, the persona. You're building a custom suit for Catwoman, So you
Right.
know her fear, you know her hopes, you know her passions. It's
Yeah.
interesting. So you have, this is the jester, the sage, the magician, and the ruler, and then you have also known as, and their motto, their core desire, their goal, their greatest fear, and their strategy,
Yeah.
and their weakness, and their talent. Interesting. So that's like a full orbed, like, you know, that person. I mean, going through these 7 or 8
Yeah.
levels here, I'm like, you know damn well what this person's about.
Right.
Interesting.
And, I think just as sort of an aside, which I'm sure you guys talk about, but, with sync, we're not necessarily telling a story, because it doesn't serve the marketing.
Right.
It doesn't function well, because marketing's give me the short hook, give me the rulers, the chorus can be,
Give me the payoff.
right. In short, concise, the hook shouldn't take 8 bars to play out for you to understand it. It just needs to be, I'm taking control. That's
Right.
the hook, whatever.
But these support mechanisms help you get there
right.
in a way that is concise and accurate and complete. I mean, it sounds like if I know their fear, their strategy, their weakness, and their talent, like, you're going to hit the target.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like you're not guessing. You're not flitting around and hoping to hit something. It's like you understand their DNA and their hopes and their passions.
Right. Now
That's an interesting way to approach not only songwriting but sync.
Yeah, right? Because it's like almost reverse engineering it, where you're like,
Right.
I already know the backstory. Whereas in country, it's like, well, what is the backstory? Where's this person from, and what are we,
Yeah.
That's the creative side of that. This is like, hey, I already have it all here. I know, so I need to put this into something that's creative and powerful and compelling, on brand, sonically, that works in the marketplace and is easily edited by the editors for trailer and marketing.
Yeah. So you're giving them something that's super focused, to the point, on brand. I hate the word brand, but that's kind of what this. It's like you're not getting close. You're hitting the center of the target.
Right, and sometimes it's more obvious than others. I mean, Tommy Profit, who's a producer and writer here in town, he had a song called just Heroes, and I mean, there's tons of songs just called Heroes, but I mean, it killed. It had a great really compelling vocal performance by Mike Maines, and big strings, and it was dramatic and powerful, and like the networks are like, yes, because again, it's not, if we put on our marketing hats and take off the songwriter producer hat, where you're thinking more records, you're like, this track, it's got to have a bigger build than you might normally think you would do. I mean, I had that happen the other day. I turned in a track and we intentionally just sort of not had it go big, but it had such a cool vibe. And there's a place for that too, right? Not every track has to get huge and have this massive payoff, especially for songs that are getting used in the shows. They can be more chill. It doesn't have to get in the way, but we turned in a song that could potentially be used on like the show Yellowstone. So it had tremolo, sort of, not spaghetti western, but kind of, vibey spring reverb, guitar stuff down, it was in E minor. It was all kind of down low, and it was great. It was vibey. The guy sang in his lower register. We'd gotten some creatives saying, or some briefs saying, we need more music like low vocals like Leonard Cohen, but they didn't want Leonard Cohen songs, but they were just saying, like where it's not, it falls in a lower range. So anyway, we turned it in, and I had some cool, like, darker percussion that was cinematic, but they're like, we need it to build, it's got to get bigger. And I was like, we didn't make the track. I ended up doing some revisions and we built it out bigger. But all that to say, it doesn't always have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But again, we were working, an archetype that day on the right, that this guy's a wanderer and he's out fighting.
Yeah.
He's kind of out on his own and he's fighting against some demons. He's fighting against some other things, so.
I love that. And Kurt, you talked about briefs a bit.
Yeah.
I wonder, for us at the Sync Center, there's some kind of questions around briefs. I think there's a lot of kind of over briefing where people send out briefs that are closed, and like we don't really pitch to briefs, but I know that's a lot of people do. What's your approach to that? Because I've found that there's a lot of, I don't know, bad actors isn't the right word, but there's a lot of pay to play stuff to where you're pitching for a brief that is 6 months old and that project has been done already. What are your thoughts on briefs and pitching for that?
1000% agree. So here's the thing. The whole idea of the archetypes is to get away from writing for brief.
Right. So you kind of circumvent the brief.
Totally.
Like even if there's not a brief, there's gonna be a brief, a legitimate brief, a real use coming up in 2 weeks for the hero or the wanderer or the lover.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly. It doesn't matter, because here's the thing. By the time I get the brief, the creatives have already changed their mind and I don't know it. So
it's 3 weeks old. It's 4 weeks old.
Exactly. Or they've already found a track and, am I going to, that's the thing. I don't want to be chasing briefs, and I don't want to be chasing my tail, like staying up all through the night because we got to get the song in tomorrow because they need it. And
it's unfortunate because it's become so popular for the pay to play, pitch to the brief or pitch to supervisors. And it's like,
it's a losing strategy. I think
it's a bad strategy that I tell people. It's like, don't play that game. It's like, no, you
exactly, John.
You're 150th in line behind 149 other people, and the deal's closed to begin with. So why?
Right.
Yeah.
But if you can have a catalog of stuff that's based on these archetypes that is in line with, what's being used and the current sounds and all of that, then you're skipping over the brief, because you'll already have songs. Your songs are going to work for a lot of briefs.
Legitimate briefs.
Yes.
Right.
Because you're like, oh, I have a song about that's up tempo and fun about feeling free, because they want to sell cars, they want to sell phones, they want to sell shoes. All those products are selling freedom and fun, and like, okay, yeah. Hey, my song's like, let's have a good time. It's fun. It's up tempo. It's going to work for the shoe. It's going to work for the phone. It's going to work for the car.
Yeah.
Done.
That's a pretty important thing. Like circumventing the brief bullshit.
Yeah.
That's a big deal that I wish a lot of creatives, people who pitch music and write music, it's like they're playing the wrong game. They don't even know the game that they're playing.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you've got some examples of these, Kurt, of some projects you've done?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to hide this.
Sure.
And okay, so I'm going to play. Here's an example of a song that I wrote with an artist. Her name is Anna Graceman. And so when we wrote, I said, this was actually kind of the tail end of COVID. And I said, all right, here's what I think. I think that coming out of COVID or nearing the end of COVID, I said the brands are going to want to reassure that we're all going to be okay.
Right.
They're going to want to put out messaging that's probably like that. So
turning the corner, we're going to make it.
Right, exactly. So that's the caregiver archetype, I felt.
Okay.
And So we wrote this song called "Be All Right," and I'll play a snippet
Yeah.
of the song, and then I'll show you it. It ended up landing a commercial, and I'll show you the commercial. So how much of this you want me to play, John? I don't want to like bore you, but like, can I play
45 seconds, 50 seconds, whatever you need.
Okay, yeah. Is that loud enough?
So much wondering, it's uncertain. We don't know just how it ends. Through the struggle and all the searching, we will find ourselves again. We'll walk this road until we're home. Yeah, we'll be alright. Oh, we'll be alright. And I won't let you fall. I'll be right by your side. Yeah, just keep holding on. It'll all be alright.
So that's the gist of it. Later on, it it gets bigger.
I'll be right by your side. Yeah, just keep holding on. It'll all be alright.
So, I'll show you how it got used. They actually didn't use any of the big part, and they made an edit. And obviously, this is just a 30-second commercial, but this was a national spot that Tide used. Now, this isn't necessarily about COVID, but it was one of Tide's programs where they were coming into communities after disaster and like giving supplies and stuff for people to do laundry. And so here is the spot.
So much wondering, all the searching, we will find ourselves again.
After a disaster, you don't just want something new, you want what's yours. That's why Tide Loads of Hope is expanding to provide clean clothes to more people in crisis. With every purchase of Tide Hygienic Clean, you can help too.
Be alright.
So they made an edit where they got the hook in again at the very end, and it worked. Oh, you're muted, John.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, that sounds great, man. I love that spot. So you wrote that preemptively coming out of Rona, thinking that people are going to need that warm blanket at some point.
Yeah, it was a bet.
Yeah,
Paid
that's
off.
great, man. I love it.
Yeah. Okay. So the next example is, okay, this was a song, you probably know Jason Eskridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Jason and I and Ty Smith wrote this song. And again, it wasn't to a brief, I mean, like if you do your homework, you know the shows that the networks are running, and you can look at the themes. So the show The Rookie, which is, kind of a cop drama. We wrote, it's along it's kind of the hero thing, fight for my life. It's about the struggle, that the show, the cops they're doing all kinds of heroic things, but just the broad theme of this is just this guy's a fighter in terms of the song. So, and it's funny. So I'll play you part of the song, but again, just in terms of understanding how the stuff functions in the market, like just the simple chords up front with the piano, and then the short hook is, I'm gonna fight for my life. That's it. Like, you don't need any more lyric to know what else, you know, that's the whole message, right? So it's a short hook. So when the song's done, I'm like, you watch. If it gets used, they're gonna use the piano intro, they're gonna cut to the, you know, they won't use the verse lyric, which is pretty common. They don't generally use that. Then they'll cut to the short hook, I'm gonna fight for my life. Then it usually ducks down into to more voiceover, and then they might bring up the end of the track. Like, that's kind of the edit. That's how they usually go for like the short trailer stuff. So you'll see it. But anyway, here's the song.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Knocked down and counted out. I'm the one they forgot about. No chance to win the game. No way to ever be the same. But they don't know, they can't see. This fight ain't just for me. Got too much on the line. I can't quit, no, not this time. I gotta fight. Gotta survive. I ain't never gonna give up.
What a voice.
Never gonna give up. I gotta fight for my life. I ain't never gonna give up. I ain't never gonna give up.
So yeah, I mean, Jason's just amazing. His voice is like, oh, just pulls you in.
Yeah.
You know, so again, like, and it's so soulful, and you know, it just works. So
Yeah.
put Real B3 on there just for, you know, to up the emotion of it, and big stomps and claps just so it carries the weight of, you know, when you put it with a visual. So
And you would say that's the hero?
yeah, I mean, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Is the hero kind of the warrior, the fighter?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's great, man. Yeah, Jason sounds great on that track.
All right, so here's the spot.
Okay.
Go full screen.
Big changes will be made moving forward, and those changes will start here, right now.
I gotta fight for my life.
Your job is to serve and protect the people.
If I can't handle talking to her while she's in a cage, I shouldn't be a cop.
I show up pregnant on day one. That's all they will ever see me as.
I can't undo the mistakes I've made, but I can help make them right, no matter what it costs me.
The season premiere of The Rookie, Sunday, January 3rd on ABC.
I mean, it's, you know, it's so short, it goes by so fast, but it did what it needed to do.
Eric,
Yeah, I love that.
Conveyed the emotion. It helped with the marketing. The messaging was perfect for, you know, what they're selling that week.
Yeah, that sounds great, man.
Thank you. All right. I'll play a snippet of this. Now this song, this hasn't placed, but I felt like we kind of were working under the Explorer
Mm-hmm.
archetype for this, and it's kind of it's just like a pop. It's a fun pop song. The title is Wherever We Go.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see when it gets to the chorus. It's
I know you wanna go out, but something never done before. And you don't wanna go up, or maybe we can find a cure. Do you wanna play hide and seek? You wanna end up where we're meant to be? Baby, won't you let me read? Just let go and follow me. Chasing stars, shining bright like a match, ready to light. We'll together. When I take it anywhere, we'll go wherever we go. Touch the sky, you and I, we'll go wherever we go. Wherever we wanna be, and bring this company out. Take it anywhere, we'll go wherever we go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's light, it's fun. We go wherever we go. You know, it's just carefree. That stuff is such a common, you know, theme. Now, would Jeep use this? Probably not, because it doesn't have maybe the grit.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, for certain products, it'd be great.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have fun doing tracks like that, and it's fun. You know, it's just you have a little. It keeps it interesting to not always be in the same, you know, vein.
Yeah. I love that. That track sounds great, Kurt. And who'd you write that with?
So that's the artist Gail, which she so she like blew up. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
She has this song like A B C D F U.
Yes.
Yeah. So so I wrote that with Gail and Michael August.
Mm-hmm. It sounds great.
Yeah, it's fun. So the Explorer things can be, you know, they can be a little more acoustic driven, where there's acoustic guitars or, you know, ukulele. It's fun.
And thinking about this through the archetypes here, I could imagine for you, like I wrote for Sony back in the 90s and produced music for 10 years. So it's like you tend, as a producer, you kind of do what you do.
Right.
Find your strengths and you kind of stick with those strengths. This kind of, you know, I could see how this kind of keeps you fresh because you're not always doing guitar focused, you know, rock. You're not doing the same damn thing every 3 months on every record.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why that's why it's fun. And that's really, that's what, you know, and even back, you know, 10 years ago, that's why I loved doing commercials, because one day it'd be a thing that where I'd write a horn arrangement and then the next week it would be a rock thing or an electronic thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Or an orchestral. I've always loved, you know, thankfully I have a rich background, you know, musical background, and that's really helped. But
yeah,
I have about 4 or 5 kind of, I call them lanes, but
that
I like to work that I can and I'm good at. You know, like I don't do everything. I'm not your first guy to go to for like legit hip hop. You know, I'm not that guy. But
I totally get that. So Kurt, can we share these slides out with the group?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. That's awesome, man. And question just kind of broadly, Kurt, what are you seeing going on that's interesting to you in the music and sync world? What do you, any trends that you're seeing that is interesting or compelling? Or uncompelling?
I think the hip hop thing has been picking up steam for several years and continues to.
Mm-hmm.
And not like, you know, not like traditional hip hop where it doesn't do much musically, but just the hip hop sensibility over other types of tracks and styles. You know, I think that has seemed to keep things fresh. Where it's like, oh, you might have an aggressive rap thing over a driving orchestral thing that has modern drum production underneath it. So it's, you know, it's like this hybrid.
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, and that's evident just in music moving forward, right? It's just always like, oh, it's a little bit of this and these two things put together that hadn't been put together. I think that's what can try to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
So it doesn't fall into the same old,
Yeah. Love it. And what are you seeing less of? What's kind of going away?
I don't know. I mean, this is not a creative answer, but this is a business answer, is that I see, there are networks that are starting to move to more of a buyout model. So I see a lot of the low hanging fruit going away. I think the trailer companies will continue to license, and Netflix and all of the streaming. I mean, there's, we're in sort of the heyday of the streaming services. There's so many, so there's so much content, which is good for, us as creators. The price will kind of continue to come down as things naturally do. But yeah, the networks are some of them are wanting to curate their own libraries where they're just kind of owning stuff. So in some ways, some of the licensing is kind of starting to go away. Not on,
Yeah. And in their defense, because I mean, most of the stuff we do is from the buy side. So we're managing sync and supervision and clearance for the project.
Yeah.
And I know for the composer and the producer, that's kind of a bad thing when it's a buyout. But if you think about it from the filmmaker's perspective, like if they license, we're doing a lot of in perpetuity uses.
Sure.
So if they license for a year and they have to come back each year, that is just handicapping that film.
Of course.
It's more expensive to do an in perp use, but they just want it done. They want to be able to let it go to Roku. They want to be able to let it go to all the different streamers, and they don't want to come back every time. They just want it done, buttoned up, and ready to go. We're seeing a good bit of that, to where it's like, it's just all inclusive and perp done.
Right.
And I get that. It's like why would they hire us every year if we can do it once and complete it for them going forward?
Sure.
It's much more expensive, but I get it.
Right. And just for clarity, for anyone watching, I think, like a composer that gets hired to do the score for a movie, that's a buyout. Now, the songs that get licensed in the films, those typically are not a buyout. Those are licenses, like you said, but those are in perpetuity because obviously they're living in the film.
Right.
And what the buyouts that I'm seeing happening are at the network level, where Fox wants to own songs that they can use for their promos for next week's show instead of licensing from you and I.
Yeah.
So that's just for clarification. That's what I'm.
Yeah. That's a great point. Good, Kurt. Well, man, thanks so much for jumping on and talking about this. As we've been talking about sync and supervision, I've thought about what we talked about 2 years ago at Sinks and Drinks and the archetype, everything we just talked about today. And I thought that would be it's a really smart tool that, you've kind of applied to music. I mean, we've all heard about archetypes in film, but you're bringing it to music. So, thank you for joining us. This was really great, man.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Glad to do it.
And what's the website? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
My email is kurt@worldwidegroovecorp.com, and the website's worldwidegroovecorp.com.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Kurt, thanks so much, man. This was fantastic.
You're welcome. Thanks, John.
All right.